Discover 6 incredible fruits to fight leg cramps and transform your senior health forever. Walter sat on the porch, the early morning sun casting golden hues over the sprawling fields. At 75, he felt the weight of time more than ever, especially when the cramps struck. They seized his legs, ruthless reminders that he wasn't the spry soldier he used to be. For decades, he cherished his independent life on this land, a life woven through generations. Now, the independence he valued slipped through his fingers like loose soil, and he felt like a ghost in his own world. The whispers of neighbors stung, making him feel invisible. Days turned into weeks, and Walter resisted the call for help, burying his pride beneath layers of stubbornness. Emily, his granddaughter, noticed more than anyone else. Her college classes in nutrition opened her eyes to the intersections of old-school wisdom and modern health. One evening, as she watched Walter grimace while shifting in his chair, something inside her surged a fierce determination to help him reclaim his joy. "Grandpa, let us fight those cramps together," she proposed with a bright smile that reminded him of sunflowers reaching for the sun. As she dove into research, Emily discovered the potential of 6 incredible fruits: bananas, watermelon, oranges, cherries, kiwis, and avocados. Each fruit carried magical properties, supposedly easing leg cramps and revitalizing the elderly. She rolled up her sleeves, envisioning colorful smoothies and fruit salads vibrant enough to spark her grandfather's lost energy. Walter, however, clung to silence, unwilling to show weakness. He preferred to manage his pains alone, convinced that the fortitude of his bygone days would somehow reappear. As the community buzzed with laughter and chatter, he felt the stirrings of resentment mixing with fading pride. Each time they gathered at the county fair, surrounded by families laughing and sharing stories, Walter felt the shadows of age creeping and a whispered judgment hanging heavy in the air. "Come on, Grandpa. Just one smoothie," Emily pleaded, but Walter simply shook his head. The last thing he wanted was to be a burden. The thought turned his stomach. Just as Emily felt defeated, the town's annual summer event arrived, setting the stage for change. Colorful decorations adorned the square, but the atmosphere shimmered with tension. Walter found himself standing beside a booth, bracing against the murmurs. His heart sank as he overheard folks talking about the troubles of old age, their words sharp like thorns. It stung worse than any cramp. He felt a wave of shame crash over him, nearly knocking him off balance. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. But then, unexpectedly, the tide began to turn. As neighbors exchanged stories across the fairground revealing their own aches and fears, something magical happened. Walter listened, transfixed, as a young father disclosed how he'd hidden his own health struggles. A grandmother shared her quest for vitality in her golden years. Slowly, the weight of judgment lifted, and light sparked within Walter, illuminating the solace found in shared vulnerability. As the stories mingled in the air, Walter's hardened spirit softened. In the depths of his heart, he realized that accepting help from Emily and his community didn't make him weak, it made him human. He felt an urge to share his pain, to unburden himself from the loneliness of pride. But would he take that step? Could he trust in the love surrounding him? The answer loomed in the warm summer air, hanging just out of reach as he turned back to the crowd, battling the conflict between honor and the embrace of vulnerability. Walter stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding in his chest as laughter and chatter floated around him like the summer breeze. The sun warmed his back, but a chill ran through him, igniting the familiar battle between his vulnerability and his desire for connection. As he glanced at Emily, dancing with her friends, her laughter bright and unrestrained, something deep within him shifted. It was time to consider her offer, to let someone in. But was he ready? The ringing of the bell sounded, signaling the start of the pie-eating contest nearby. It drew many of the townsfolk's attention, laughter erupting as competitors squished their faces into plates of pie, yet Walter remained focused on the rhythmic thud of his heartbeat. Finally, he took a step closer, intrigued by a small group of neighbors sharing their health stories so freely. It was an unexpected realization. Maybe he was not as alone as he had feared. Old Frank over here used to swear by bananas to keep him going, a man chuckled, his voice light and bright, cutting through Walter's heavy thoughts. Frank, a spry 72-year-old, nodded, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile. Never a cramp in my life as long as my missus kept them stocked. A wave of warmth washed over Walter. It was comforting to hear such familiarity, to witness laughter without the weight of judgment. He leaned further into the group, drawn to the intertwining stories of resilience. Each shared experience felt like a small thread, weaving him back into the fabric of the community he had distanced himself from. Emily caught his gaze and winked, as though urging him to step forward. Inspiration bubbled up within him, and before he knew it, the words slipped out, hesitant but clear. I've been fighting my own battles with leg cramps. Maybe I need to add some bananas to my diet. Laughter broke out in the small circle, and Walter felt a blush creep up his cheeks. He had spoken, he had shared a small victory against the fortress of pride that had held him captive. Encouraged, he continued, how about we all try a challenge? We can each choose a fruit for a week, and see who really feels a change. The idea sparked a ripple of excitement. Heads nodded, voices chimed in agreement, and suddenly, Walter was a part of something once more. The beauty of vulnerability was taking root. He was no longer the ghost wandering alone. As the contest concluded and families began to disperse, Walter felt a sense of lightness in his heart. He and Emily could practice their smoothie recipes together. They could talk, laugh, and share in developing this new routine that began today. The secrets of healing weren't just found in the fruit, but also in the warmth of togetherness. Yet, just as the last of the crowd began to fade, Walter caught sight of a few familiar faces whispering in a corner. He could see concern etched on their brows, eyes darting his way. The earlier worry crept back, shadowing the joy that had begun to blossom. What were they saying? Fear gripped him as he thought, was this moment of connection merely a fleeting illusion? As he attempted to shake the unease, he noticed Emily approaching, her eyes bright and full of hope. But with her, another figure appeared, a man Walter hadn't seen in years, one whose words had once stung deep. Would this be a chance for reconciliation, or merely a return of old pain? The air shifted, tension rising once more. Walter took a breath, feeling the delicate balance between possibility and fear. What would he choose? Would he embrace this new chapter or retreat into the shadows of his old life? The decision loomed, and as he prepared to face the man from his past, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Walter's heart raced as the familiar figure stepped forward, his silhouette cutting through the vibrant crowd. It was David, someone Walter had once considered a friend. Memories surged, the laughter they shared, the arguments that severed their bond. A mix of anxiety and dread filled his chest. Would this be an opening or a gut punch? Walter, there you are. David's voice was louder than he intended, drawing curious glances from people nearby. Walter felt his cheeks flush. He could feel the weight of the past pressing down around him like an old, heavy coat that refused to let go. Hey, David, Walter managed, searching for a way to navigate this minefield. I saw you were involved in the pie-eating contest. Looks like you're getting out more these days. David's tone sounded light, but Walter detected an edge beneath it, a hint of concern or perhaps pity. With Emily glowing beside him, Walter sensed a shift in the energy around them. "Yeah, trying to join in a bit more," he replied, forcing a smile. He hoped it would sound convincing enough. Emily chimed in, her enthusiasm radiating. "He even started a fruit challenge." She pointed playfully at Walter. "Maybe we can coax him into being our team captain." The laughter that followed lightened the air, and even Walter found himself chuckling. But David's expression shifted. His eyes narrowed a bit, and that small moment of lightness evaporated, replaced with tension. "You always were the captain type." There was something in his tone that scratched at a wound Walter thought had scabbed over long ago. "Yeah, well, it's time to embrace change," Walter replied, steeling himself. Could he confront the past without it consuming him? "I heard about everything, you know," David started, glancing at the gathering crowd, then back to Walter. "You isolated yourself for too long. It's good to see you back." The words lingered with a weight. Walter's pulse quickened. Didn't he want to revisit old wounds? "What's your point, David?" he shot back, his tone harsher than he intended. The laughter around them dulled, conversations quieted, and eyes shifted toward the unfolding drama. "I just mean it's okay to ask for help," David said, his voice softer now. "None of us are perfect." Walter felt the raw honesty of the moment. An invitation to reconnect, to mend what once felt irreversibly frayed. But could he let go of the resentment of the hurt? The smiles of the townsfolk melted into the background. The warmth of Emily's presence washed over him, and he found himself at a crossroads. "I appreciate that, but it's not so simple," Walter replied, his heart in a twist. "You don't know what I've been through." "Try me," David challenged gently, his gaze steady. Before Walter could respond, Emily spoke up, her voice clear and vibrant. "We all have battles to fight, but together we can lighten the load." There was a spark in her eyes, a flicker of hope that ignited something deep within him. Walter stood at a precipice, his emotions swirling. He could choose to share his struggle or retreat into the shadows of silence. In that moment, he realized that vulnerability might not be as terrifying as he thought. Yet, as he took a breath, ready to either forgive or confront, a sudden shout broke the tension. A little girl, laughter ringing out, had slipped in the mud from the pie contest, her parents rushing to help. The spectacle drew laughter and applause from the crowd, momentarily shifting the focus away from Walter and David. "See?" Emily said, the corner of her mouth twitching upwards. "Life happens not always according to our plans." Walter smiled at that, feeling the tension ease just a touch. But the question loomed large. Would he let this moment of connection spark something new, or would it fade like so many others before it? As the crowd roared with renewed joy, Walter turned back to David, a question on his lips that might finally bridge the past with the present. "What if we could start over?" he asked, uncertainty flickering beneath the surface. As David nodded slowly, the atmosphere around them buzzed with excitement. The world felt alive, vibrant, and connected. But before the conversation could deepen, another interruption came, a rustling commotion on the edge of the square. What had shifted next amid the renewed laughter? Could it challenge everything they were beginning to rebuild? The air hummed with anticipation. Walter braced himself. He could feel the ground shifting beneath him once more. Just as the crowd's laughter echoed, a young boy, his face painted in bright colors from the festival, dashed past them, nearly colliding with Walter. He stumbled and grabbed hold of a nearby table, sending a tray of half-eaten pies tumbling to the ground. The splat of cherry filling splattered all over the cobblestones, like a moment of chaotic joy amidst the growing tension. Walter turned his attention from David to the scene unfolding before him. The shock of the moment, the laughter of children, reminded him just how unpredictable life could be. It was messy, just like these pies, full of unexpected turns, but undeniably real. The boy grinned sheepishly, wiping the remnants of a pie off his own face, and the crowd erupted into delighted laughter, breaking the spell that had held Walter in a moment of uncertainty. "See that? That's what life is," Emily said, her eyes sparkling. "Full of surprises, both sweet and messy. Sometimes all you can do is laugh and move on." Walter chuckled, the tension easing slightly. He looked over at David, who was watching the scene with a bemused smile. The connection between them, which had felt so fragile just moments ago, now seemed to flicker with possibility. Maybe starting over wasn't as scary as he thought. Maybe it could be more like the festival, unexpected but full of color and laughter. "It does seem like life is throwing pies at us," Walter replied, feeling a warmth building inside him. David's gaze softened as he looked back at Walter. "Yeah, but the important thing is how you respond. Do you dodge, or do you join in the chaos?" Walter took a deep breath. "I've mostly dodged," he admitted. "But maybe I'm ready to take a shot." Their eyes met, and for the first time in a long while, Walter felt a glimmer of hope. The idea of mending things with David wasn't as overwhelming now. The warmth of their shared history began melting the icy grip of resentment tied to his past. Just then, they heard a voice calling out, "Hey, Walter." "David." It was Tom, an old mutual friend, waving wildly from across the square. "Come join the pie fight. You can't miss this." Walter hesitated, glancing at David and then at Emily. A pie fight? It felt so juvenile, yet there was something liberating about the idea. He could already imagine the laughter, the joy of running into the fray, and even the potential messiness of it all. Emily nudged him gently. "What do you say? Life is short, let us throw some pies." Walter looked back at David, whose smile was eager. There was a challenge in his eyes, an invitation to be part of something fun rather than continue to labor over the past. "All right," Walter said, his heart racing with both fear and excitement. "Let us do it. But I warn you, I'm going in full force." As they took their first steps toward the chaos, a feeling of camaraderie began to bloom, a sense of belonging that Walter thought he'd lost forever. The pie fight wasn't just about messy laughter. It represented the chance to embrace life again, messy parts and all. Then, just as he began to immerse himself in the lively atmosphere, a commotion erupted at the edge of the square, louder and more frantic than before. Walter's gut twisted as he saw townsfolk gathering, expressions shifting from joy to alarm. He grabbed David's arm, his heart pounding. "What is happening?" The air turned electric with a sudden urgency. Walter could feel a familiar dread creeping back in, a stark reminder that life's surprises weren't always joyful ones. As they pushed through the crowd, a new question formed in his mind. Would this unexpected turn become an obstacle or another opportunity for connection? And could he still find his way back to laughter amidst the chaos? The scene shifted abruptly. The laughter and cheer of festival-goers faded, replaced by concerned whispers and frightened murmurs. Walter squeezed David's arm tighter, instinctively seeking reassurance. They pressed forward, hearts pounding, as they maneuvered through the throng of people. "What is going on?" Walter called out to a woman nearby, her face etched with worry. "A fire broke out at the bakery," she replied breathlessly, shooting anxious glances towards the smoke billowing into the sky. "They're trying to put it out, but it's spreading fast." Walter's stomach dropped. The bakery was not just a place that sold bread. It held years of memories where he and David used to grab cinnamon rolls after school. It was part of the community fabric, a gathering spot for birthdays, anniversaries, and everyday conversations. The urgency settled over him like a lead blanket. "Did anyone get hurt?" David asked, his voice steady but urgent. "I don't know," she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I think some folks are trapped inside." Walter felt his heart sputter. Trapped? All of a sudden, the chaotic joy of the festival felt remote, like a fading dream. He glanced at David, whose face was a mirror of his own panic. Yet there was also a determination in David's eyes that sparked something in Walter's chest. Without thinking, Walter pulled free from the crowd. "We need to help." "Wait!" David caught up to him, gripping his shoulder. "What is the plan, Walter? We can't just rush in there. We have to do something," Walter insisted, his voice rising above the chaos. Adrenaline coursed through his veins, igniting an urgency he hadn't felt in years. The sight of the flames danced in his mind, a stark contrast to the warmth of shared memories. Walter's resolve deepened. "I want to just stand by while people are in danger." Not again. As they neared the bakery, the heat hit them like a wave, the acrid smell of smoke clinging to their clothes. The townsfolk had formed a barricade, trying to keep the curious and panicked at bay. Walter could hear sirens in the distance, and the clamor of emergency voices drowning out everything else. "We can't go in there alone. They all need help," David urged, his worried gaze scanning the area, searching for guidance. In that moment, Walter's breath caught as he spotted a group of volunteers emerging from a nearby building, laden with hoses and buckets. An idea sparked. If they banded together, they could help lessen the flames' grip on the bakery. "David, we can rally people. We can start a bucket brigade," Walter said, his excitement bubbling up amidst the dread. "We can help them among all this chaos." A spark of hope ignited in David's eyes as the two exchanged quick glances, and David nodded, determination written all over him. "Let us do it." They turned to the gathering crowd, rallying those who looked on helplessly. "We need hands. Anyone willing to help, now is the time." One by one, people stepped forward, courage filling the space where fear had lurked moments earlier. The festival's spirit started to swirl once more, morphing into a powerful wave of community support. As they moved through the crowd, Walter could feel the warmth of connections forming. They were all in this together, and for the first time in a long while, that idea felt right. But just as they gathered the last of the volunteers, a loud crack erupted from the bakery as flames licked higher, forcing Walter to instinctively shield his head. The crack was followed by the urgency of shouting, an unmistakable voice calling out for help. "Get back! Everyone, clear the area!" Walter froze, heart racing. That voice was familiar, laced with desperation. It wasn't just chaos anymore, someone was inside. The world around him turned to a blur as he strained to see inside the inferno. He glanced at David and took a deep breath, an internal storm brewing. Could he be brave enough to do this? Could he really dive into the chaos once and for all? "David," Walter began, his voice shaky but firm, "I think we need to go in, now." Before David could reply, Walter pushed through the throng once more, setting his gaze on the fiery doorway. The question burned in the back of his mind. Could he find the strength to face fear head-on and come out the other side? Walter's heart pounded like a drum as he forged ahead. The heat wrapped around him like a fierce embrace, every step towards the bakery filling him with equal parts dread and determination. He could hear the roar of the flames, the crackling wood, and the muffled cries from somewhere beyond the smoke. "Walter, think about this." David's voice rang out behind him, but there was a new edge and urgency that suggested he was now fully on board. "We can't just charge in. We need a plan, a strategy." But Walter didn't want to hear it. He was fueled by the thought of those trapped inside, their desperation acting as a fire of its own within him. As more volunteers began positioning themselves to form the bucket brigade, Walter heard more shouts reaching his ears, voices overlapping in the chaos. Each cry felt louder, more pivotal. They weren't just calls for help, they were pleas from friends, neighbors, and even cherished faces from the past. I can't stand here and do nothing," Walter yelled back as he took another step toward the looming flames. Suddenly, David grasped his arm with surprising force. "Wait, please!" Look, he pointed toward the back of the bakery, where the flames swirled below a shattered window. "If someone is in there, we could trap ourselves. We need to wait for the firefighters." For a brief moment, Walter hesitated, a sliver of clarity cutting through his urgency. He turned, scanning the faces in the crowd, watching the startled expressions of those who once stood in front of that bakery for a friendly chat or a shared dessert. He felt the weight of their eyes, a mix of fear and hope, resting on him and David. "Let us help with the brigade, then," Walter finally replied, voice tense. "As soon as the firefighters are ready, we can get in there." The words felt like compromise, but reality told him he was still tying himself to danger. Just then, the first fire truck screeched to a stop outside the barricade. The piercing siren seemed to slice through the clouds of smoke and fear. Firefighters began jumping on and off the truck, grabbing gear and shouting orders to one another with a practiced urgency. Walter swallowed hard and stepped aside, allowing the first responders to take charge. But the anxious whirls in his stomach wouldn't settle. He had to do something, anything else. He turned to David, who was already forming a determined expression. "Okay," David said, "let us grab buckets, get them filled with water, and be ready when they say it's time." The two of them rushed to gather volunteers. Walter passed along instructions, throwing himself into the task filling buckets, dipping them into the troughs of water set up nearby, and relaying them to the eager hands forming the chain. With each passing moment, he felt gratitude for the team spirit crystallizing amongst the townsfolk. Neighbors were working together, the fear of the fire melting away as they united in a common effort. But even as they passed the buckets, an unsettling notion crept into Walter's mind. He could still hear the agony rising from within the bakery, and he kept waiting for the first sign of rescue to echo through the roaring flames. Then, just as Walter reached for another bucket, he saw a shadow darting past the flames, barely visible but undeniably human. His heart squeezed painfully. "David!" Walter exclaimed, pointing in disbelief. "Someone is moving in there. We have to go. We need to wait for them to control the fire." David shouted back, his eyes wide with panic. Walter didn't care. He turned back once more, determination overtaking reason. The flames flared with menace, but underneath them, there was a flicker of life. That flicker was too strong to ignore. As he prepared to push through the fire-scarred remains of the bakery, suddenly a figure stumbled out from the smoke, arms flailing for balance just as the firefighters surged forward. Each beat of Walter's heart echoed with a sense of urgency and a pulse of hope. Would they make it in time? "Walter!" David's voice rose above the din, tracking the movement, but Walter didn't take his eyes off the figure now emerging. And just like that, the question loomed heavily over him. Was it too late to turn back? The figure stumbled, and Walter's breath hitched. It was a woman, her clothes coated in soot, face streaked with ash. He barely recognized her as Mrs. Lawson, an old friend of the family, who had once babysat him as a child. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, a flicker of hope. "Help me!" she gasped, struggling to maintain her footing as she fought against the haze and heat of the flames behind her. "Walter, stay back!" David shouted frantically, but there was no way Walter could simply watch as a life hung in the balance. Without thinking, he darted toward Mrs. Lawson. His heart raced. The world around him became a blur, the roar of the flames fading into the background, replaced solely by her desperate cries. "Grab my hand," he yelled, reaching out to her, but as he did, he was abruptly yanked backward by David. "Are you crazy? You can't go in there!" David cried, nearly losing his grip on Walter, who was fighting to break free. I can't just let her die," Walter shouted, finally breaking free of David's grip. He took a step forward, feeling the searing heat envelop him, the smoke a choking cloud. But ignoring it, he willed his legs to move faster. The firefighters arrived just in time. A burly man grabbed Walter's shoulder, and he spun around to meet the fire captain's stern gaze. "We've got this. Stay back." But Walter could see the fear in the captain's eyes as they assessed the inferno that seemed to consume everything it touched. Just get her out," Walter pleaded, pointing emphatically toward Mrs. Lawson, who was now stumbling, nearly lost to the flames. Somehow, this plea slipped into a command, every ounce of his focus directed at rescuing her. The firefighters moved fast, like a well-oiled machine. Leaving one member of the crew to deal with the advancing flames, another rushed forward, crouching low to the ground. Through the acrid smoke, he reached out for Mrs. Lawson, his arm a beacon slicing through the chaos. She was almost there. But just as she reached for him, the flame surged. A powerful gust directed a plume of fire toward her, causing her to scream. Walter felt his heart drop as fear and adrenaline twisted in his chest. In a split second, the firefighter darted forward, cradling her and pulling her away from the danger. They dropped to the ground, rolling away from the flames, and Walter felt a fleeting moment of relief until he caught sight of her face smeared with soot, and the terror still traced around her eyes. "Walter." Mrs. Lawson's voice was weak, but it pierced through the noise. "I'm so scared." Her hand trembled as she reached out for him. "I've got you," he reassured her, feeling the weight of his own fear lift for a heartbeat. But then, just as they pushed together to move further away from the inferno, a loud crack split the air. The atmosphere shifted violently as part of the bakery crumpled in on itself. A surge of panic erupted through the crowd. Walter instinctively grabbed David's arm, their eyes wide with realization as the building's stability faltered. "We need to get everyone back. Now!" David yelled, and the urgency spread. The firefighters were guiding people away, but Walter couldn't help but glance back at the flames that were now spreading menacingly, swallowing the last remnants of the bakery. "Come on!" David pulled him. "We've done what we can." But as they retreated, Walter's gaze caught upon the silhouette within the flames once more. Was there yet another person left inside? His thoughts raced, his resolve hardening. He could feel the community's eyes on him, everyone waiting to see what he would do next. Was he truly ready to face the fire again? With Mrs. Lawson cradled protectively to his side, and David readying himself for whatever came next, Walter felt the weight of a choice pressing down. Would he push his fear aside once more, risking everything, or would he finally heed the warning of his own heart? As the smoke thickened around them, the question burned just as much as the fire. Who else was trapped within the flames, waiting for a hero? Walter's heart thundered in his chest as he locked eyes with the smoldering structure behind him. The bakery, once a place of warmth and laughter, was now a twisted frame of flames and destruction. Mrs. Lawson shivered beside him, still clutching his arm like a lifeline. "Walter, we need to go," she whispered, her voice trembling with fear. But he could barely hear her over the crackling roar of the fire. Was someone else still trapped inside? A faint shout? It clawed at his instincts, an undeniable urge to act. Before he could think it through, Walter took a step forward. "David, I think we can't. The building is collapsing," David shouted, but Walter wasn't listening. Every fiber of his being screamed for action. He had to know. "Just stay here," Walter said impulsively, turning from David and racing back toward the engulfed entrance, fear and adrenaline propelling him forward. The heat hit him like a brick wall, sweat pouring down his face. "Walter," David's voice echoed, sharp and panicked. But Walter pushed through, weaving through flames licking at his clothes. He could barely see, the smoke stinging his eyes, but he felt for the ground with his feet, searching for anything. Anyone. "Hello? Is anyone in here?" he shouted, hoping against hope someone would answer him. Then, faintly, he heard it. A muffled cry, weak but unmistakable. It sent a surge of determination through him. "I'm coming!" Walter yelled, and without hesitation, he plunged deeper into the suffocating smoke. He focused on the sound, stumbling over debris that crunched beneath him, feeling the heat grow more intense. "Keep talking. I can't see you," he shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the flames. I'm here," came the response, a voice he barely recognized, scratching and rasping, fear palpable in the air. With renewed determination, Walter moved toward the sound, trying desperately to navigate through the chaos. Just then, he felt something soft beneath his hand and arm. He gripped it tight. "I've got you," he gasped, yanking the figure toward him. Narrowing his eyes, he focused on the face that emerged from the smoke. A boy, no older than 10, with ash-streaked cheeks and wide, terrified eyes. "You're all right. Just hold on to me." Walter's stomach churned as he turned, guiding the boy back through the debris. But as he stepped toward the exit, the building shuddered violently. Time seemed to stretch and collapse around him, as reality struck the bakery. "Wouldn't he hold?" "Faster," he urged, feeling the panic rise in his throat. Behind him, the sound of falling beams echoed ominously, the smell of scorched wood filling his lungs. He stumbled forward, feeling the heat closing in. "You're safe. I promise," he shouted to the boy, desperately willing both of them to make it out alive. Outside, David watched in horror, adrenaline rushing through his veins as Walter and the boy neared the escape. "Come on! You can do it!" he hollered, but fear gnawed at him like an unfinished puzzle. Would they make it? Just as Walter and the boy broke into the open air, a deafening crack resonated behind them. Walter barely had time to look back, his instincts screamed for him to move. They dove to the side as a piece of the wall collapsed, sending debris crashing to the ground behind them. They landed hard, gasping for breath, and Walter felt tears well in his eyes as he saw David rush toward them. "You did it! You actually did it!" David cried, pulling them both into the embrace of relief. But as they lay there, catching their breath, Walter couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Disbelief washed over him as he looked back at the smoldering ruins now enveloped in smoke. "Is everyone out?" Mrs. Lawson's voice broke through, full of concern, pulling Walter back into the moment. "No," he whispered, his heart sinking. "Not everyone, but who else remained behind?" The thought gripped him, leaving his chest heavy and hollow. The sense of urgency returned, demanding action once more. With the flame still raging, was there time to save another life, or had he already pushed fate too far? As uncertainty churned in his gut, he felt the weight of the night press down, squeezing hope and desperation into a single question: would he step back into that inferno once more? Walter's heart raced anew as he scanned the wreckage of the bakery, the flames still dancing hungrily. The boy, whose name Walter had yet to learn, clutched at him, wide eyes brimming with confusion. David hovered nearby, his face pale, a silent question in his gaze. "Who else is in there?" David pleaded, fear etched deeply on his features. Walter swallowed hard. "I don't know. I just heard a voice. It might be been the baker, Mr. Hargrove." Mrs. Lawson had knelt to comfort the boy, her hand shaking as she brushed soot from his cheek. "You're safe now, sweetie," she murmured, though her own worry was palpable. But Walter's mind was already racing. "Stay with him," he urged David, a surge of resolve igniting within him. "I'm going back in." "No!" David's voice cracked in protest. "You can't, it's too dangerous. You already risked your life." Exactly, Walter said, voice firm. If I don't go back, who knows what might happen? I can't leave him in there, if there's a chance. His breath hitched, thoughts swirling. It was more than just a chance. Someone was trapped, and Walter couldn't simply walk away. With a determined nod, Walter turned toward the inferno once again, feet moving before his mind could catch up. The heat was overwhelming, and the smoke was thick, a living thing that clawed at his lungs and made his eyes water. Each step deeper into the bakery felt like wading through treacle, his heart hammering in sync with the crackling of the flames. "Hello, Mr. Hargrove," Walter shouted, voice strained against the roaring fire. "I'm coming for you." Every moment felt like an eternity. The walls creaked ominously, and he could hear the sound of debris falling, a reminder that time was not on his side. A fragment of wood fell next to him, and he stumbled, heart racing with fear. The boy needed him, then he heard a distant groan, deeper than the roar of the flames. It was unmistakably human. Walter pushed forward, shoving aside flaming remnants of the bakery as shells. "Hold on. I'm here." Moving through the choking haze, he felt a guiding presence, an unbearable urge to keep going, to not give in to the fear. Drawing closer, he could almost see a figure hunched against the far wall, silhouetted by flames. His pulse quickened, mixed with hope and trepidation. But just as he reached out, a loud crash echoed through the building. The floor buckled beneath him, sending him sprawling to the ground. He coughed, fighting against the smoke. He had to act fast. "Mr. Hargrove, are you there? I'm going to get you." "Walter," came the strained voice, barely above a whisper, but it grounded him. He surged forward again, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Stay there. I'm coming." As the flames flickered dangerously close, he grasped the edge of a table and pulled himself up, determination igniting within like a phoenix rising. He wasn't leaving without the baker outside. David paced restlessly, worry twisting in his gut. "He is taking too long," he muttered to himself. "I should go back in." But Mrs. Lawson's hand on his arm stopped him. "We can't lose him too," she whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. Walter could feel the weight of their worries, their hopes hanging on his next move, just as he felt the bakery shake again. The air crackled, almost like it was daring him, challenging him. Just a little longer, he promised himself. As he pressed forward through the smoke, something shifted, revealing Mr. Hargrove's terrified face emerging from the shadows. Relief surged through Walter, but right behind it was the crushing realization of the stakes. Could he really save them both? And then the ground shook again, more violently this time, and Walter's world spun. Would this be his last stand, or could he find a way out? The smoke and flames roared around Walter like a wild beast, but with each breath, he pushed deeper into the chaos. Mr. Hargrove's face was smeared with soot, his eyes wide with panic. "Help me," he gasped, voice strained, lost in the overwhelming crackle of destruction. "I'm here," Walter shouted back, adrenaline surging through him. He took another step forward, the heat searing his skin, but the sight of the terrified baker urged him on. "Grab my hand." Walter reached out, fingers brushing against Hargrove's arm as the older man struggled to move. Just then, the ground shuddered beneath them, sending shards of debris tumbling from the rafters. For a moment, Walter hesitated, fear gnawing at the edges of his courage. But in that instant, he caught a glimpse of the boy's face, his innocence reflected in the flames. "Don't lose hope," Walter yelled, his voice echoing off the charred walls. It ignited something in Hargrove's eyes. With newfound determination, the baker gripped Walter's arm and pulled himself upright. The moment was fleeting. As Walter yanked him towards safety, the structure creaked ominously overhead. "We have to go now," Walter urged, pausing only long enough to kick aside the burning remnants blocking their path. The duo pushed through the haze, Mr. Hargrove leaning on Walter for support. They stumbled forward, feeling the flames licking at their heels, heat that whispered for their surrender. But surrender wasn't an option. Almost there, Walter shouted, pointing to the exit now barely visible through the smoke. But just as they pushed through the doorway, a final shudder erupted through the bakery, and they felt the world twist around them. Walter's heart raced as he yanked Mr. Hargrove towards safety. They barreled out just as the last beam collapsed behind them with a shattering crash. Walter staggered, breathless, planted firmly on the ground beside the smoldering ruins. David, Mrs. Lawson, and the boy rushed forward, their faces a mix of relief and shock. "Walter!" David shouted, eyes wide as he rushed to embrace them, catching both men as they fell to their knees. "You did it. You saved him." Tears burned Walter's eyes, and he looked at Mr. Hargrove, the realization washing over him like a cool rain after a storm. This was more than a rescue. It was a moment of transformation. "We're alive," Walter whispered, voice choked with disbelief. Mrs. Lawson knelt beside them, wrapping a comforting arm around the boy, her eyes shining with relief. Thank you both," she breathed, yet her gaze flickered back toward the wreckage. Together, they shared a moment of silence, reflecting on the fragility of life until the echoes of the fire settled into the background, leaving a newfound hope hanging in the air. From that day forward, Walter began to rebuild his role in the community. With each passing week, he donned a new perspective, allowing his neighbors to lift him, much like he had lifted Mr. Hargrove and the boy from despair. The bonds of shared vulnerability strengthened. The stories flowed from small gatherings at the pie shop to community meetings inspired by those very stories that had once unsettled him. Emily, delighted with her grandfather's transformation, became his partner in the kitchen, whipping up vibrant smoothies with the fruits she'd once championed. "Let us show everyone how to eat healthy, Grandpa." Her laughter echoed through the house as they concocted recipes filled with a rainbow of fruit. They began incorporating bananas, cherries, and avocados into new local dishes, reconnecting with neighbors over food, laughter, and newfound camaraderie. The town held a festival in honor of the bakery's rebirth, infused with stories of strength, resilience, and hope. Walter found himself at the center of it all, now the captain he always wanted to be, but this time on a voyage of connection rather than isolation. As the sun dipped below the horizon that day, casting golden light over the bustling square, Walter felt something he thought had slipped through his fingers for good. He belonged. He let the warmth of community wrap around him like a comforting embrace, each laughter and shared story stitching him back into the fabric of life. Finally, he stood tall, feeling the applause of friends and family wash over him. "Thanks to all of you, I'm back," he declared, voice steady and filled with emotion, "and I'm never going to let go again." The ongoing transformation flowed through him, and with it came the unmistakable realization that nothing was ever truly lost. It was a rebirth as vibrant as those 6 incredible fruits, the promise of health, happiness, and unity, lifting spirits, filling hearts, and letting joy reign as they forged ahead into brighter tomorrows. Now, dear friends, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to our channel, so you don't miss our next exclusive stories that will inspire you. Hit that like button now, because it feeds the algorithm, helping our community grow. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this impactful ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation, because together we grow stronger, braver, and more vibrant with every story shared. Don't wait not even one more second to share. Your support means everything to us.